yeah, it definitely comes down to, are you able to win the games, the big games? And we know it's not all on the quarterbacks, right? But the quarterbacks are in position to make the plays and to not make the plays from the standpoint of making the major mistakes that cost you games. And so the jury's out on Jalen Hurts, but he has the opportunity. I think one of the great things last year about the Eagles was that running game, obviously, which he has a lot to do with.
Before I bring in Jarrett Bell, let me tell you about Lamar Jackson and why I love this kid. He's a leader. He's a community guy. He's a role model. When he beat Patrick Mahomes last year, that's the first time I went like this. Okay, we got something here. Because if you're going to be elite, you've got to beat guys like that. And for Jalen Hurts, he's got to beat Dak. He's got to beat Rodgers. Let's bring in my friend, Jarrett Bell from USA Today. I so thank you for doing this. Jarrett, am I right? This is how you look at the NFL quarterback today. It's not so much about putting 4,000 yards up. It's about beating those Patrick Mahomeses and Tom Brady's of the world. We have a whole different opinion of Matthew Stafford than what we did when Matthew was in Detroit after what he did this past season to Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. I mean, when you look at Jalen Hurts, how do you give me your assessment on Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I think, Jalen Hurts has got the opportunity, right? And they had Carson Wentz a couple years ago, not too long ago. Didn't quite work out, even though it looked so promising early in his career. But yeah, it definitely comes down to, are you able to win the games, the big games? And we know it's not all on the quarterbacks, right? But the quarterbacks are in position to make the plays and to not make the plays from the standpoint of making the major mistakes that cost you games. And so the jury's out on Jalen Hurts, but he has the opportunity. I think one of the great things last year about the Eagles was that running game, obviously, which he has a lot to do with. But, I think they're going to give Dallas a run for the money. But, just because I think it doesn't mean it's going to happen.
We'll get to the NFC East here in a second. So you think this Eagle team is the team that beat Jarrett in the NFC East this year?
That may be a bit much to say they're the team to beat, but I like them to really give Dallas all they can handle. I mean, I think the Cowboys are the team to beat for a couple of reasons. They won it last year, and they've got, a lot of continuity from what they had last year. The defense was much better, but you know how it goes a lot of times, Dan, with the Cowboys in recent years. It's been on one year, off the next year, on the next year, off the next year. And by my equation, that means this might be a down year for the Cowboys compared to where they were last year. But we'll see.
17 penalties. And, I know it's exhibition football, but to me, Jarrett, that's sloppy. And that just carried over from last year. They were one of the most penalized teams in the NFL last year. And to me, that comes to discipline. Now, I had a cup of coffee in Dallas, and anytime when Mondays come around and the first voice out of that building is Jerry Jones's, and it's not the head coach, they haven't had a guy in that building since Parcells, and going back to my coach, Jimmy Johnson, that the buck stopped there. And they just put these speed bumps, it seems, in front of themselves every year, and that's why they can't get out of their own way. Is that a fair assessment of what Dallas has been like the last 27 years?
Yeah, the last 20, however many years. Like you said, Parcells was in there for, 4 or 5 years. But, I think that's one of the things with the Cowboys when you look at the fact that they haven't been to a Super Bowl, haven't sniffed a Super Bowl in so many years. You wonder what it is about the culture. I mean, we know Jerry Jones and what he has accomplished in terms of you putting the Cowboys on such a high level from a business standpoint, a marketing standpoint. But the best marketing is to win. Well, I think Jerry may argue that.
Used to be.
But, the fans really want to win. I mean, they care about it. It's amazing about the Cowboys, Dan, that they have remained so popular, if you will, without winning big. That is just so fascinating. And we know Mike McCarthy's on a hot seat. I mean, regardless of what, we know that this is going to be make or break for him, likely. And so to your point, your first point about the first voice you hear on a Monday morning, and if it's not the coach, who is it? I think that speaks volumes. And they'll deal with that again this year. So Mike McCarthy,
Is Carson Wentz the starting quarterback at the conclusion of the 2022 season in Washington?
I haven't thought about it that deeply. I think if he stays healthy, they'll ride.
He put up good numbers Jarrett, 3,700 yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 picks. But I'll tell you what, may have been the worst 8 minutes of football I ever saw in that Titans game. And then the colossal failure in Jacksonville. He's just got these moments, doesn't it, that erases all that equity he builds up.
Yeah. And it's like what we were just talking about a couple minutes ago with, winning quarterbacks in the NFL. That's the difference, because we don't really want to, hang too much on the stats, even though those were impressive stats, right? 7 picks for a season, really good for a quarterback. But it has to happen at the critical times. And yeah, you talk about a quarterback, and we'll see about Matt Ryan this year, how it works in Indianapolis. But if you're talking about walking into a situation where, the Colts could definitely upgrade their wide receiver core, we know that, but they've got a great offensive line, a great running game, a really good defense. And so the table is set for a quarterback to succeed there. And Carson Wentz didn't get it done, as we know. And we'll see whether, how that changes in Washington, because they've got some ingredients that you could work with. But I think it's not as solid as it would be in Indianapolis, and as solid as Matt Ryan is going to have in Indianapolis. Now, whether or not he'll be the guy to go that next step, we'll see.
The Eagles have controlled scrimmages on Wednesday and Thursday against the Browns, and then they play them Sunday. I'm assuming Deshaun Watson is probably going to be out there on the field. And before I ask the question to you, I do want to put a precursor on this here with you, Jarrett, that I was talking to Mike Gullick the other day, and I still think the Browns would have made the move anyway. I think they knew that they were going to get the political blowback on how this was. I think the Players Association and the league are in a bit of a pickle here, because they had the guy last year active. They paid him. He got a credited year last year. So don't tell me that the league didn't know what was going on, because the Texans, Jarrett, they paid 23 settlements themselves. So you got the league, the commissioner's office, and now the Browns and Deshaun Watson in this. So this suspension, I don't know, man. I mean, it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life in how it was handled. How do you think this thing unfolds this year? Does he play the whole year like Brady did and then get into a courtroom next year? How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, now that is a real possibility because of, kind of where it's at. But just to back up for 1 second on that, or to re-ramp the entry point here. Yeah, it is just such a bizarre situation when you talk about how it's dragged on, all the different elements here, the different things that have been uncovered. And it's just so hard to put your arms around it. But, I think at this point that any suspension, and we know the NFL, well, there will be a suspension, but whatever that length is, it's pretty much all about optics right now, because he has missed that time. The league definitely had to throw the book at him, or try to throw the book at him as best as they could, because if they didn't appeal it, then they're going to face even more blowback than they've had to this point. The fine, whether it's $5 million or $10 million, I mean, that's a lot of money, it's a whole lot of money to me.
Yeah, I hear you.
But if I've got a $250 million fully guaranteed contract, I can probably take that hit. And so I wrote a column over the weekend saying that I really think, from a personal standpoint, the way I see this whole thing, the most important element is going to be the counseling and the treatment for Deshaun Watson. And you look at his statements from the time he got to Cleveland, and then in recent days, talking to the NFL Network, and he's kind of moved off of the defiance that he had earlier, and just the denial, if you will, that there was really no problem. But if there was no problem, we wouldn't be talking about this right now. So there is some sort of problem. Now, I'm not a doctor, and obviously not privy to all of the what happened there in all those situations. But I think for him personally, yeah, this is an opportunity to really work on himself and get that. Now, the fans don't really want to hear that, in terms of, if you're a Browns fan, you want to know when he's going to get on the field. It'll happen eventually. So your question, is he going to miss the whole season? I think if the NFL comes down and if Peter Harvey rules that it's a year-long suspension, I think the union has got to take that next step now, just like the league did, and said, okay, we've got to go the Tom Brady route. Maybe that'll get him on the field for this year. You get an injunction and kick it down the road. So I think that is still a real possibility. And, the talks, the settlement talks in recent days kind of really gives you some, hope, if that's the right word, that there'll be some resolution that both sides can agree to. It's taken a long time for this expedited appeal to
sure has.
I think that's one of the more surprising things too, because we thought maybe a week max before Harvey would come back with his decision. Still not happening.
Two last questions here for you. Tom Brady has built up enough equity for us to do this, right? Okay. Anybody else takes 2 weeks off during the middle of training camp, and especially that dude, Aaron Rodgers, we may have went like this. Well, the guy's a little weird anyway. Guy's smoking on papaya juice now and doing whatever. The guy's whatever that's good for him. But Tom Brady, who's been so disciplined in his life, guys like you, Jarrett, you're probably going to give him the pass because he's got the equity and the rings to go like this. Hey, look, I need some personal time, but I'll say this to you. This is bizarre.
It really is, especially when the word came out that, this was already talked about. We knew this was coming. So the Bucs didn't handle it very well in terms of, breaking this out to the world, right? And Brady himself could have done more. Until when he comes back, he'll have some explaining to do. But Tom, he can explain as best as he sees fit, right? And like you said, he has the equity. I mean, is this going to set a precedent? Does Aaron Rodgers, to mention the guy you just mentioned, does he come back next year and say, I want to take a couple of weeks off in training camp? Or a Russell Wilson in Denver? Now,
those guys would get killed for that.
Yeah. They compared to Brady for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had holdouts before. I think back to like Michael Strahan. He won a Super Bowl. He's held out in training camp and ended up, playing a major role in the Giants winning the Super Bowl. So the value of training camp can definitely be debated, and especially, like you said, for a proven veteran with so much equity like Tom Brady. But it's just not a good look. And I really wonder too now about how Bruce Arians would have taken this as the head coach versus Todd Bowles. Not to pick on Todd Bowles, but we know Bruce Arians was the guy who was saying stuff like, the quarterback made the wrong read on that interception. The quarterback was late getting the ball out, so on and so forth. Not hesitating really to call Tom Brady out, unlike even Bill Belichick would publicly. And so, it definitely casts a different type of cloud over the Bucs. Now, Brady will come back conceivably if everything is straight on the timeline that they've given us. He'll have a couple of weeks to work before the regular season, and who knows? I mean, he may just pick right back up. And I mean, it's Tom Brady, so we fully expect him to. But I say that from the standpoint of, being able to help put his team over the hump. I mean, they've got a really tough first month of the season. They open at Dallas. They play at New Orleans, which is even more troublesome for Tampa Bay than for other teams. Right?
Has he beaten them in the regular season at all since he's been in Tampa? I don't think he has.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's their Achilles heel. So they've got them in week 2 at New Orleans, and then they've got the Packers and Aaron Rodgers who will be fresh. I'm sure maybe he'll take a couple of days off of practice that week. I don't know. But then they've got Green Bay in week 3. So the Bucks definitely need to get off to a fast start. And Brady, I'm sure obviously he knows that better than I do. But the point being, it is, as you said, just one of the strangest things. And we keep saying that. It's like stuff happens covering this league and talking about this league for so long as we have, Dan. And then, what does it say that we keep coming back and saying, hey, this is really strange from everything we've seen and heard and witnessed over time. It is, it is, maybe the apocalypse is
I don't, hey, you know what? You lead me to let me sneak in one extra one here on you. This Stephen Ross, my opinion. So I believe Brian Flores 100% that guy went to him because there was something even in the investigation in language that said draft positioning is important. Well, if you're offering the head coach $100,000 to lose ball games to get draft positioning, you're talking to Brady a couple times, one when he was in New England, and then the other time you're trying to offer him percentage ownership of a team you haven't even talked to your board of directors on. Look at the tampering. Look at the fixing of games. I mean, I'll tell you something. This whole Deshaun Watson thing kind of, I guess, goes over that. But, Jared, for a guy that's covered the league, like we just were saying, you talk about bizarre. I've never seen anything like that, an owner meddling like that with people under contract. The Bucs could sue Brady for breach of contract if they felt like it.
Yeah, and there will definitely be, other parts to that in terms of, who initiated and just thinking from time, if I'm Tom Brady and I'm in this, because remember they're Michigan guys, right? So there's that connection, alum connection. So they have relationships that probably go beyond the NFL, but you're in an NFL environment. And I don't give Stephen Ross a pass at all because the rules are the rules, right? And, it was just so weird when the NFL made this decision and they came down hard on him. And the reason why he was crowing publicly, I still don't get. But, the point being that they tried to frame it like the alleged tampering statements were made in jest. Well, if you are in power and you can make good on that wisecrack, then it doesn't matter. I mean, you try going through an airport security line and make some kind of joke about explosives and see where that gets you. And
I got a gun, and then you go like this. Not really. I'm only kidding. I don't think you're getting on that plane.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's the way I liken it in this whole Stephen Ross thing. But you know what it does too, Dan? It really kind of bolsters Brian Flores' credibility for his other battle, even though the NFL came and said, okay, we saw nothing that was discriminatory or anything that would help us. Because of course they're going to say that when they're going to have to defend themselves in court as well. It's stinky, but it definitely makes you say, okay, everything that this man pointed the finger at Ross for is probably true. Okay. And so I think it kind of actually bolsters his case, at least, in my eyes and maybe in the eyes of public opinion.
Finally here, I love Lamar Jackson. We've kind of gone back and forth on Twitter. I tell him this too. I give him a bunch of crap because I go, how did Miami kid like you get out of Miami and you're up at Louisville? That's why I hated Al Golden. He laughs. We go back and forth. He's spectacular at Louisville. His mom is representing him. I love the fact that, he said this, I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, they don't have a deal by the start of the regular season. He's not going to have negotiations during the season. Jarrett, does he want to stay in Baltimore? Do you think he gets out there on the open market? Because if that guy puts the season up like he did 2 years ago, you think that Deshaun Watson salary's big? This guy's there's going to be a king's ransom for him.
Yeah, based on Lamar's statements, and there are a lot of layers to it in terms of, that being a deadline, which is still very possible. We know how, these deals can sometimes come together when they're is a deadline. So that's really the next deadline, because I thought the last deadline was when he went to training camp, right? But to your point about him wanting to be a Raven, he says he wants to be a Raven. So let's take him at his word on that. The one thing about Lamar is that he has been unconventional in how he plays, how he handles himself, and we love him, Dan. I know you just said it, and
I saw him on the playground in the inner city with the kids. I'm like this. I tweeted out, there's a $250 million guy playing on the cement with inner city kids that has everything to lose there, and he don't give a crap. Dude, to me, I mean, he's a role model.
Yeah, but still, when we're talking NFL business,
I get it.
You've got to do that. And so not having an agent when you were a rookie, and I remember talking to him about it at that combine, as a lot of us did, where, his reasoning was, well, there's a rookie wage scale, it's slotted, it's not going to make that much of a difference, right? But where it really has proven to be, questionable is this situation, when you can just concentrate on what you do, let someone else do the negotiating for you, and you probably have a deal by now. Look at Josh Allen. He's a couple years now, into his deal. And so I think that's the risk. But, whether he will get out of Baltimore, I don't think that's going to happen, because they'll have the franchise tag and then they'll have another franchise tag. So him getting out of Baltimore is a conversation for, 2025.
Yeah. 2 more extra years. Hey, I want to get your thought before you leave here. Dion says it's getting, because you're a Hall of Fame voter, Dion says it's getting easier and easier to get. My uncle has one of them gold jackets, Andy Robustelli. So, okay, your comments, because you're one of the stewards of that place. What's your take in response to Dion?
Yeah, I totally get what Dion says. And I think the Hall of Fame should be hard to get in, right? And it is interesting because, now we've got an expanded, class of seniors that can get in, and no knock on the seniors at all. But, if you didn't get in after, 20, 25 years, from the time you last played, 20 years of eligibility, 25 since you last played, I don't know. It is definitely tougher to get in as a senior. And there are, most of the seniors that do get in, you could really make a strong case for them. But that's one side of it. The other side of it is why, and I say that, and I've said this in meetings, so it's not, wouldn't be total news to fellow selectors, because I've always felt like, it should be tough to get in the Hall of Fame. And it's not automatic. We put a lot of first ballot guys in. And I'm not saying some of these guys don't deserve to get in, but it's kind of like, what's the rush on some guys? And so it has definitely been something that I've wondered about, just put it that way, because we have these max classes year after year after year. And, I remember I've been on the selection committee for, almost 25 years. And I remember we've had classes where we had like just, 3 guys get in, right? And so, and that felt right. So I can understand Dion's position on it, and others who question things. The other thing that happens too, though, is that there are a lot of people that get a lot of candidates that play less glamorous positions that get overlooked. So, we know Dion, we know a great quarterback, I would say we know a great receiver, but we've got a log jam of receivers too. But when you start talking about inside linebackers and offensive guards and safeties, it tends to be a little bit tougher for guys at those positions. So there's still only 300 and something. I think it's up to like 370.
360 something, I think. 361 or 2.
Yeah. So that's still a pretty exclusive number when you talk about, a league that's been in existence for like 103 years or whatever.
There's only been 29,000 men that have ever played in the National Football League, and there's only 362 men that have gold jackets. So I think that percentage is right. The people in Philly would be remiss if I didn't ask you this. Why isn't Eric Allen in the Hall of Fame?
Eric Allen is a great candidate. And, I can't really answer that except to say that, the competition has been there, and it's it's been one of those things where, Eric Allen was so good for so long that he almost got ignored and taken for granted. And so maybe that's part of it with him.
Like a Mike Haynes,
Yeah.
because Mike Haynes was a great player during his era, and you go, Mike Haynes, he's a Hall of Famer, and you're like, yeah, but you never really heard Mike Haynes because Mike was so awesome, nobody threw in his area.
Exactly. Yeah. And they didn't throw at Deion a whole lot either, but for some reason, Deion got a lot more notoriety. So that is definitely, one of those guys. And that conversation has also extended to Ken Riley, another when I talk about the seniors guys.
Great Bengal.
Where Kenny Riley didn't have a lot of all-pro accolades. I think he may have made it once or
60
twice.
picks, over 60 picks, right, Jarrett? Something like that.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Well, I don't know if he had 60, but maybe he did. But but when you talk to players who played in that era and they talk about who got overlooked, so often his name is one of the first that pops out of people's mouths. So, hopefully that doesn't happen to Eric Allen and it goes to that extent where, we're talking about him as a senior or anything like that, but definitely a worthy guy. And I think about, some of those Eagles defenses. Yeah. You needed. Yeah. He was the truth.
That gangrene defense with my boy Jerome Brown on it, man. And Reggie and Seth Joyner and Wes Hopkins and Andre Waters, man. The only thing that team doesn't have on the 85 Bears, the 2000 Ravens D, and that Bucks defense, and the Steel Curtain, I would say as well. You're talking about the greatest defenses of all time, and that gangrene defense was just spectacular.
Yeah, no, it truly was, and he was a big part of that as well.
Absolutely. Hey, Jared, I've had a fabulous time talking with you. Hey, do you got a column out here coming up in the next couple of days here? I'd love to have people go over and read you. You're spectacular to read.
Yeah. Nothing to promote right now, but, the last thing I wrote was about Deshaun Watson, as I mentioned earlier, and kind of the idea of treatment and counseling as really being maybe the most critical part of whatever comes down, because we know he's going to get suspended, fined, could be a lengthy, legal battle, all of that. So let's not just throw Deshaun Watson away, regardless of what you feel. Yeah, but this is an opportunity so that this will never happen, and Deshaun Watson can come to grips with what got him here.
I find the commissioner's comments in his statements to be appalling on when he called him a sexual predator, when he didn't use that exact phrase, but to put it predatorially. And I said this: a United States, jury did not find, a grand jury, two of them did not find that in those wordings, but yet your court has found that with that ruling with Sue Robinson, that she would say such a thing like that. I think the Players Association, if they had any backbone, Jarrett, would sit there and go after the commissioner for that, because his reputation's already in the toilet, okay? And building it back up in Cleveland is going to be something the Browns want to do, and also he wants to do. And to put your foot on his throat like that, to say that, you're defeating what rehabilitation is, I think. And I took offense to what he said.
Yeah, and the one thing, I mentioned counseling and treatment, and then
which I completely agree.
Right, but no, but here's my concern about it too, Dan, and it kind of coincides with what you're saying. There's a stigma there, okay, and hey, I'm not absolving him of
absolutely not
may have not happened, but the weird thing about this whole case is that it seems like we just still don't know all of the facts and how everything went down and what the motivations were. And there's a lot of gray area. And so I think that's part of the challenge for Deshaun Watson moving forward. And like I said, I'm not trying to absolve him at all, because
no one is.
He has to be accountable for his actions. But that stigma with people using words like that, and with people wondering kind of, what your state is mentally and where you are in that process, that's going to be something he's going to have to deal with. But again, those might be just, that's consequences of some of the, the episodes that have happened to get him here.
Absolutely. I can't wait to read another column of yours. You're a great friend, Jarrett, and thank you so much. I mean, I always ask Hall of Fame questions to guys like Cole and Rick Gosselin and
you love
Howard
to
Walter and all you guys. You guys, man, I'll tell you, I think your job is so tough putting these dudes in nowadays because there is a backlog now of great players. I mean, you go back and Dennis Hara and Klecko and God, there's so many debates going on. And I love you're a steward of the game. Thank you, my friend.
All right, Dan. I appreciate you having me, man. You take care.
You got it. Our good friend Jarrett Bell from USA Today Sports. He is absolutely a sensational writer, and I value his opinion big time. I love what he says, and I love the guys who are the true stewards of the game as well. And he's one of those. Hey, folks, don't forget our friends at Morgan & Morgan, where the fee is free, meaning this. They don't get paid unless you do. Morgan & Morgan does this for you. If you've been ever injured on the job, they're going to protect your rights like no other law firm. For the people, it's not just a saying. It is what they are and who they are. It's not a logo or it's not just a slogan. With over 600 attorneys in offices in Philadelphia, New York, and in Florida, for the past 30 years, Morgan & Morgan has collected over $13.5 billion for their clients. You heard me right. This is who they are. Call them at 800-512-1600. That's 800-512-1600. Open 24/7, 7 days a week. 800-512-1600. Consultation's free and the call is free. And when you call them, tell them Dan Sileo sent you.
After a car crash, the big insurance companies you see advertising on TV, they may try to downplay your case and might say it's only a fender bender or it's just a herniated disc. I worry that some law firms fall for this BS. Not us. We put ourselves in your shoes and ask, what would it be like to be in your pain for the rest of our lives? $1 million wouldn't be enough for me. There's only one Morgan & Morgan. ForThePeople.com.